Hello and welcome to today's webinar, How to Fortify Your IT Infrastructure with Ransomware Protection Strategies Services. Thank you so much for joining us on the webinar today. This event is brought to you in partnership with our friends at Metallic and Veristor. We've got a great discussion lined up for you on a really hot topic in the industry today. It's affecting every company out there of all sizes. So thank you so much for joining us on the webinar. Before we get started, there's just a few things that I should mention about today's event. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'm serving as the host today. We're glad to have you. We want this to be an educational event. We encourage your questions there in the questions pane of the audience console, and we will be taking your questions during the event and also our dedicated Q&A session at the end of the event. So keep those questions coming electronically. We even have a best question prize to help perhaps shake some of those questions loose, if you will. I'll talk about that here in just a moment. But first, I also want to encourage you to check out the handouts tab. It's there that you'll find links to get started with Metallic and also get started with Veristor. There are special trials that you'll find once you click on those links. So make sure you check out those resources. At the end of the webinar, I'll be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card door prize. If you're watching this on demand, of course, that drawing would have already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found there in the handouts tab as well. And then, as I mentioned, we also have our best question prize. This is for an additional $50 Amazon gift card here in the live event. We just want to, help further encourage questions. If you've got something on your mind, maybe you're not quite sure if you should ask it. By asking a question, you'll be entered into this prize drawing. Of course, you still have to meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions, and we will contact the prize winners after the event. All right, so with that, it's now my pleasure to welcome today's expert presenters. Let me bring in our presenters now. Here we go. So I'm excited to welcome Syed, a field CISO at Metallic, CommVault Venture, Mr. Daniel Martin, Principal Security Consultant and vCISO at Veristor, and Mr. Ferrol Macon, Senior Vice President of Architecture and Strategy, also at Veristor. It's great to have you all on the webinar today. I'll hand it off to Ferrol, who will be our host and moderator. Take it away.
Here. So Veristor been in business for about 20 years. We are a full end-to-end IT operations, cybersecurity, and app development firm. And with the recent merger with Anexinet, we have enterprise collaboration and architecture capabilities around enterprise automation. So one of the things about today's seminar is it's really a foundation for who we are as a company. Veristor started right after 9/11, after the dot-com bust and Y2K. So data was growing tremendously, but budgets were way down. And there were all kinds of things that were driving major shifts in the market and how data protection happened. And virtualization came on, and we've continued to grow and add these capabilities. And then we talk about the introduction of the smartphone and the whole BYOD. And it's really important to this conversation because, back in the early 2000s, security really was more about an access. The bad guys were outside, the good guys were inside. It was more of a network perimeter. But that introduction of the smartphone and mobile apps and all that, data security really became a data-centric issue. And that's why it's a big part of our business today, and then into the future today, as you look at, how technology is now not just a part of business, but fully integrated. And the thing that we were here to deal with from the beginning about data growth has continued to be an issue throughout our entire history. So with that, we take a platform approach. Every workload in every environment, whether it's a SaaS application, private hosted, public cloud, whatever, you have to take all of these factors into consideration. So today, we're going to focus on the bottom right there and how the data protection recovery and how that is essential to a modern day strategy. So at Veristor, we cover all these disciplines, and we have 9 different business units. So we can cover wide, but we go deep as well across all platforms, public cloud, hybrid, private, and SaaS as well. So why rethink data protection now? Well, historically, when people talk about backup, and a lot of people today, they still think with this DR mindset. It's a checkbox. I need to have it for compliancy. But today, that DR mindset, it's like these things aren't ever really going to happen to us. But today's modern threats are real. They're in the press every day. Boardrooms are talking about them every day. And data protection for us has moved from a back office conversation to a boardroom level conversation. We do a lot of cyber insurance reviews with customers, and data protection and your data protection strategy is one of the 4 key elements that across the board with cyber insurance companies is key to even being able to get insurance. So what we talk about today, the bottom line is when we're thinking about data protection at Veristor, and certainly with our partner here at Metallic, we say disaster recovery is still important, but we think that companies should look at data protection from an incident response mindset. And so, Daniel, you're one of our CISOs on staff here and virtual CISO. What are some of the elements? You wouldn't even have been in this conversation 20 years ago, but today, what are those things that are in an incident response plan over and above a traditional DR plan?
Yeah, Ferrol, thanks so much. And that's where you talk about like the traditional side of how you look at things that were disaster recovery in the before the cloud digital transition. IT solved backup problems. They solved that solution for us. And typically they had results and fails. Sometimes the organization did not know it. Sometimes they stayed in the traditional IT realm or departmental. Audits were seen as, they're performing those audits and they're performing them on a regular basis. But today, we're looking at incident response is really that board level visibility, having the ability to say, are we able to recover after an incident, after a disaster or something like that? That now elevates that conversation to areas where the board or your executive leadership will look at it and want to be involved in incident response. Before you had backup and recovery tests, now we're having incident response tabletops. And these tabletops pull in all the different departments that are critical in the decision-making and answering questions. Where are we breached? How's it affected our organization? What's down? Can we even recover? That's really the key here. Can we recover from an outage based on wherever it happens? We pull these the conversations, these dependencies all together, and we bring security into the conversation at a high level. So now they have a seat at the table.
Awesome. So related to that, one of the things we talk about whenever there's always change in IT, and sometimes we have these concepts as if they just drop from the sky, when in reality, sometimes they're an iteration of things. And so there's been different players coming to this market and different things happening. But what's really important is to understand as we move to new platforms, new ways of doing things, there's principles and there's methods. And for us, it's important we always identify the principles. When you have some new product come in the market, if they leave out a couple of principles, it's not going to deliver the outcome you're looking for. And so for me, one of the biggest things is backup's never been about backup. Okay. It's always been about recovery. And now that's what one of those incident response things is. Not only can we recover, but can we help the IR area, the SOC analysts, determine where the incident, what's our blast radius? How granular can we recover? Those kinds of things. And so we're much more open to talking about those. And then the new considerations are different platforms, new recovery scenarios, and just new considerations all the time, as well as new regulations like GDPR and how do we meet these these kinds of new requirements. And so we'll talk about today the new service delivery models. That's a big focus around what Metallic is and a lot of what Syed's going to talk about. And then we also talk a lot today about smart services. So we provide managed services across these platforms. And it used to be the realm of people who didn't have, many IT staff. At Veristor, we're doing with some of our largest enterprise customers because this function has become so critical, and they want to make sure that they're getting, industry best practices met.
Yeah, and Ferrol, let me inject here. Some of the aspects, again, when you start talking about how that change is happening, security's getting a different position today than it did. Some of that position's around data security. So we assume now, especially with a ransomware incident, that the hacker's already inside. They're already in your network. They have bypassed all the perimeter protection. Now they're inside, and it's what have they compromised? What have they touched? What can we restore from? And with that, we talk about moving that conversation from backup to data protection, data security, and what do we have in place to protect the integrity of that data? How can we control user access to that? And ultimately, how do we restore from that with a solution that is agile enough for hybrid environments as well as cloud environments, and layering the security that we need to make sure that we have that integrity, isolating and into protection from isolated environments in case we have to bring up on clean networks, adding in privileged level account like privileged access management to understand how we handle service accounts and where things are isolated and backed up, especially with our third-party suppliers and vendors. And then ultimately regularly testing. I mean, it's testing still the problem, I think, with a lot of them, because you might have two data centers, but are you actually testing the failover between each data center? Are you actually testing a full service platform transition from one location to another across the enterprise? And when 70% of CIOs today are on a cloud-first strategy, these are the cloud-first conversations and data protection conversations we must have today. Syed, what would you add in here?
Yeah, and I think it's very important to understand sort of the basics, the basic principles. You have all the tools necessary to do your DR recovery and so on, but do you have a process documented? A lot of people think that they have all the tools implemented, everything is ready to go, but what about the process, right? If you don't have all the right people lined up to take action when something happens, then you're going to waste time trying to figure out the process. So, some of the recommendations we make is invest more time thinking about the process, and then align your process with the right tools and services you need to successfully recover.
That's awesome.
Which I think is why we're seeing more and more interest in these services from enterprises, because they're getting the best practices across, many customers versus the knowledge of, one to a handful of people that may not be there in the middle of the incident kind of thing. So
exactly.
All right.
So go ahead, Dan.
Ransomware, I mean, that's why we're all here, right? Understanding those impacts of ransomware. Syed, I was interested to hear your thoughts on these financial numbers, because the one thing I hear all the time is that average length of downtime. And I see that go from 19 days to 34 days to, excessive amounts of times. What's your thoughts on there of being able to identify and create real, actual, SLAs around that with a service like Metallic?
Yeah, so good question. One of the keys that I mentioned are, of course, your processes. But once you have your processes defined, you need to align your tools with those processes. Sometimes having an easy button is the right approach. Having been in this business, as a tech and over the past 20 some years, it's always okay to have the easy button. Let someone else kind of manage some of the nitty gritty of the things. With Metallic, because we own sort of the end-to-end process of the back end of protecting the customer's data, right? All the customer has to worry about is implementing the right process and then using the tool and service to recover, right? And in terms of understanding the SLAs, what you have to do is make sure that the right process, but more importantly, the tools you're using are outside of your control environment. There are at least 3 different examples just recently in the past 6 months where the attacker came in and dismantled their backup infrastructure, right? So what they had to do was build a backup infrastructure from scratch and then recover the data. So even though the data was fine, they wasted 2 weeks just building the backup infrastructure, right? So that's a very important consideration. Now, ransomware attackers are becoming more and more intelligent about what to do and how to do it.
Exactly. That's the first thing we look at when we go and consult with folks is your backup server, the control piece of it on your production network. Obviously, the connectors have to do it to move the data, but that doesn't mean your control, has to be there. So
that's right. It doesn't.
Yeah, those 3-2-1 strategies, right, of separating your data, because we've had customers that even though they have 2 different data centers, they're using the exact same technology to copy, replicate, and the same credentials to copy, replicate, and when one's compromised, even the backup copy is compromised.
Even something as even something as simple as your AD environment, right? Your domain controllers. Okay, we have our backup infrastructure, all of our data is protected, but what if we're not protecting our Active Directory? The 3 examples I use, the threat actors came through their AD structure, and and then we know what happened after that, right? So it's very important to understand what critical aspects of your infrastructure need to be really protected. I'll talk a little bit more about that later.
No, that's great. And let's talk really quickly about ransomware attacks. I mean, if you start breaking down, it is continuing the number one thing we're all focusing on, but how does it actually happen? Those vectors have been summarized kind of in these 3 points that I have on the screen today. And when you're looking, like you mentioned, account takeover, using these credentialed, harvested, even with the most recent is Uber incident that's happened, they pull these credentials so that they now have username and password to personal accounts, private accounts, Gmail, any of those above, and they're now just logging in. And that brute force login helps them with phishing and creating business email compromise attacks and things like that. And of course, anything that's exposed on the internet has to be patched. And with our resource and labor constraints today, sometimes things aren't patched in the right priority. But ironically, and the one thing that we'll kind of touch on a little bit later is like multi-factor authentication. We're hearing now that, that has got to be the thing to focus on today. We're hearing executive orders, from President Biden that says, you have to enforce in some of these critical infrastructures common, what we would in security industry would consider common normal protections of multi-factor authentication, biometrics. These things kind of now become table stakes, and I'm really glad to see that the federal government and other things are kind of trailing what we've been talking about for a while.
Yeah, and that's very important. You talk about phishing exercise and whatnot. That's how Uber happened, right? It was an 18-year-old kid did a phishing exercise and social engineering, right? And it all goes down to this, right? There are significant challenges in the data growth, like Ferrol said in the beginning, right? And it's not just data growth, it's data sprawl, right? In case of Metallic, we are in 32 different regions in Azure globally. And what are we in the business of? We are in the business of protecting customer data. Over 100 petabyte of customer data spread across the globe, right? So it's the data sprawl. With the data sprawl, the risks are significantly up, right? 400% increase in cyber crimes over the past few years, to the point where insurance companies, cyber insurance companies are actually now, I've been having conversation with a bunch of potential customers where they're mandating that thou shalt have air gap or virtual air gap storage of your critical data, right? Otherwise, we're not going to insure you. So that's where we are in this world today. And because cloud adoption is increasing significantly as well, and it's accelerated over the past 3-4 years, especially with the pandemic, right? Even more challenges are happening because now customers have to figure out where all their data is and how to manage it.
Yeah, exactly.
So then, let's talk, nitty gritty about the evolution of ransomware, right? The threat actors, I said, they're becoming more and more creative, more and more ruthless, right? Gone are the days where they would just come in and encrypt your data, and that's okay. You know what? Give me some money, and I'll be fine, right? But now, as the evolution is happening, right, they're becoming more about, okay, I'm going to take your data, I'm going to try to exfiltrate it, and I'm going to slowly leak that data out to the public, unless you meet my demands, right? So how do you protect against those threats? Of course, with normal ransomware, you back up your data somewhere, and then if ransomware hits, you recover your data and you say, sorry, we're not going to pay your ransom. But what about all these other things? The data has been moved out of your environment and is being leaking out, and it's being stolen, right? So someone has not only encrypted your data, but actually have possession of the data in their environment, in their hands. What do you do about that?
Yeah, and it
Right?
also shows that the resiliency and the speed that a SaaS platform can offer over your traditional like on-prem resources. Because when you hear about like double and triple extortion, right, you might have recovered and working on fixing the gaps of wherever it is, and you get hit again. And you get hit again, and being able to have that speed that is missing sometimes from legacy on-prem solutions, I think is a critical factor in that new cloud first strategies.
Yeah, and things like supply chain. We all know what happened last year in January with SolarWinds, right? The supply chain attacks. The threat actors, it was estimated that they were in there, the code was in there for 3 to 5 years before the attacks begin to happen, right? So it's not just a matter of protecting your data. You have to look at the entire supply chain, have the right processes in place to protect against all these new ransomware strategies that people are coming up with. Yeah, so success really depends on understanding and classifying your critical data, and not just critical data, but your critical environments. I mentioned AD, for example, right? You need to understand what is the appetite for the business, and then the tools and services you use can comfortably meet those SLAs that you are committing to the business, because it's all about the business, right? It doesn't matter which technology is being used. Can the business sustain a specific amount of attack for a specific amount of time, right? That's a business-driven conversation. And that drives SLAs, retention, and your recovery requirements. And then other strategies like mitigating ransomware and cyber threats based on the different threat vectors that exist in your environment, right? How quickly can we deploy a tool or service? How quickly can you manage it? And then how quickly you can use those tools and services to restore your data, your critical data. You don't have to restore everything, but that's why data classification becomes that much more important, right? And of course, we live in this world where I mentioned, cyber insurance companies are mandating financial technology companies and other companies to have air gap virtual storage. Other companies like other places like regulatory requirements. We mentioned GDPR. So all of those challenges exist from a PII or privacy perspective, security perspective, data sovereignty perspective. And based on the business model you have to take into account all of those scenarios to understand the right processes, tools, and services to implement. But you have to do it very, very quickly.
Yeah, I want to go back one real quick there. We're talking a cloud-first approach here. I think one of the things, cloud-first can mean so many things. And I want to be clear. This is inclusive of, Azure, AWS, GCP workloads, whatever, but that's not necessarily what we're talking about here. I mean, years ago, Salesforce took a critical function within a lot of enterprises, and because of the nature of that, the ability to respond, add capabilities. We're seeing Microsoft do that same thing with Office 365. But we have seen a lot of people like, okay, I need a cloud backup solution because for my cloud applications, and they're of this mindset that I need a different tool there versus on my current prem. And some people are very successful moving to public cloud. We've seen plenty of people like, we're going to be migrated to public cloud in 18 months, and 3-5 years down the road, they're 20% of the way there for whatever reason. Some are successful. We've seen people migrate some and stop. But so saying cloud first doesn't mean cloud only. Here we're talking about if CommVault has a lot of enterprise customers, great platform using the strengths of that, but reacting to that change and supporting people using your platform. For those that have on-prem solution, they're having to go out and make updates, whereas as a SaaS platform, you can make it for the customer base as a whole. Did I take that correctly?
You're 100% correct, Ferrol. Yeah, the whole premise behind Metallic is a hybrid approach. We understand our customers are going to continue to live in a hybrid world. There are certain regulatory requirements. There are other requirements. Customers have their internal processes that dictate that they cannot have data in the cloud, and there are all kinds of other reasons. There are oil rigs, right? Oil rigs are not going to function from a cloud, right? So as an example, federal agencies globally, right? So there's all kinds of different requirements, and you can absolutely use Metallic as a single point of source to manage your data, whether you're storing it in the cloud, but your primary is on-prem, or you are storing the primary data in the cloud, or you have an end-to-end hybrid approach. Absolutely. That is the world we live in.
The migration to Office 365 is a very good example. People still have to do their email, all that, but they're not necessarily managing the Exchange server. You're doing that for them, right? So you're managing the application itself, and the customers or providers with them are helping the administration of it. Is that fair?
Right. That's completely fair. So there's the traditional on-prem services. You have a bunch of databases, you have VMs, you have other storage that you need to back up. Same thing in the cloud. You have PaaS services that you're running in the cloud. You have functions. You have you have containers. You're using AKS, whatever, to run your critical applications. But you also have SaaS services, things like Salesforce.com, things like O365, things like Dynamics, right? All of that stuff needs to be protected at the appropriate classification level, right? Any critical data, wherever it may exist, whether it's in a SaaS service, on-prem, or in the cloud, has to be protected at the right level to sustain your business, right? And Metallic is a tool that actually offers our customers that hybrid solution, including protection of SaaS services. Good point.
Yeah, and as you're thinking about that, again, like a lot of the leadership that I've noticed is when you talk about where do you align your ransomware protection, I think a lot of people traditionally have looked at the protection. So even with the NIST cybersecurity framework, there's a certain aspect of the protection, the pre-work that happens before ransom, the blocking, the tackling. You also have the reactive side of after the event, incident response, recovery, things like that happen. How are we going to respond? But what I'm seeing is that, most of the org customers we kind of deal with put a lot of investment in the prevention, the pre-work of it. And then they don't necessarily match that equally to the reaction post-work of it. And so I think that's a big aspect of alignment that we all have to kind of think about and focus on as we make this a business conversation. It's closer to that 50-50 because the outcomes we're looking are equally as good on both sides.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Daniel, because in the security business, we're with the mindset that we are being attacked right now. There might be a threat actor in the environment right now, right? You can deploy and employ all kinds of tools and services to protect all of the threat vectors, but you always have to stand your guard because there's always going to be vulnerabilities, right? So you have to come up with a sort of an overall framework that you can use to quickly recover from if and when you do get attacked, right? You start from your prevention, right? You do your protection, your detection, your prevention, but you also have to think about, and that's what I mean by having all the processes in place and documented. You also have to ensure that you have the ability to respond immediately based on the SLAs that you have committed to your business, and you have the ability to recover in response to those attacks as soon as you can, with the appropriate data that you have to recover that can sustain your business while you're going through your incident response plan end to end and recovering the rest of the services. So process documentation, ability to respond quickly, recover the right data, which means classification of the critical data to sustain the business, are all the critical factors and all the critical ingredients that you have to have in an overall ransomware recovery framework.
Yeah, I would agree. It's like building a secure business practice, right, around that framework.
Yeah, I mean, at CISOs, we're not technologists. There was a time where a CISO was a technologist. CISOs are not technologists anymore. They are equal business partners of a CIO because their responsibility is to sustain the business, not technology.
Right.
Oh, sorry.
And so getting a data management as a service, right? Everything else is as a service, but really focusing on that data protection, data management. These are must-haves. And as you mentioned a lot, especially with GDPR and other things, privacy and sovereignty, being able to have a solution that can put data in any geographical location and be able to pull it and replace that data and recover from that, is definitely the conversation to kind of have to look at. Security has always been kind of traditionally as that advisor role, like you were mentioning. And the CISOs, now, are changing to be the enablers, being able to focus on those aspects that change the business, the security behavior and the cultural behavior around making sure our data is secure wherever it might reside.
Yeah. And I mentioned, right, Metallic is spread across 32 different regions globally. And so we have to align to all of the different privacy requirements, security requirements, regulatory requirements, and all the different countries that we not only reside, but all the different countries we support, all of the businesses in different countries that we support from an overall perspective. So cloud-based data protection is not just about cloud-only data protection, as Ferrol said, right? So you have to understand your data landscape. I think I just came up with that. What is critical to the business? SaaS applications. A lot of companies now use Salesforce.com for all of their sales processes, CRM, right? Let's forget about Salesforce.com, CRM, right? All of your critical database, file servers, all of your containers. Oh, by the way, endpoints. We all do businesses with laptops, especially with pandemics, right? More and more has to be invested in protecting endpoints now than before. Virtual machines follow. So Metallic can offer. Go ahead, Fred.
I was just going to say, people make some assumptions here. I'm quite sure that not every Salesforce user out there or administrator saw the announcement about a year and a half ago from Salesforce explicitly saying to the marketplace and to their customers that they do not provide protection of your data in Salesforce. And so we have a number of customers we have on the Metallic platform that we provide that service to them. And then there's a lot of people migrating to Office 365 that think Microsoft says they're backups, and their SLAs, I think, are 7 days. Microsoft never backed up your Exchange server when it was on your enterprise. Why people think Microsoft backs up Office 365? I guess because they think cloud, kind of does it all. It doesn't, and we've been able to help people understand that and move some projects forward very quickly because we're able to provide that service.
And that's funny you mentioned that, because Microsoft actually specifically says that the customer is responsible for the protection of their data, right? Not Microsoft. They make no commitments of protecting your data. They specifically say that they recommend that customers should have a good data backup and data protection strategy. So what is Metallic? As I said, we protect anything from SaaS applications to end-to-end hybrid cloud data protection. And we also offer ransomware protection with different technologies that we have recently acquired. For example, the announcement from today, Metallic ThreatWise, integrated into the service. We offer that service to our customers. It offers customers with ransomware protection, and that's more on the prevention side of things. Endpoint protections, Active Directory protections. So of course, the three major attacks that happened in the past 6 months all happen via attacking their Active Directory. So you have to make sure that you protect your Active Directory environment, not just protect it, but back it up, right? So we are the ones, Metallic, as a SaaS service ourselves, we are the ones that actually take care of all of it. 21 years ago, I was a backup administrator, and there was a bunch of effort I had to put in to run the servers, patch the servers, network, all of the stuff that required me to effectively do my job, right? There were tape libraries, and I had to eject the tapes and make sure that the tapes are sent offsite and blah, 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 right? As a backup administrator, I hope people can sympathize with me on that, right? But now with Metallic as a SaaS service, things that Metallic will take care of that customers don't need to worry about: maintaining the backup infrastructure, right? All of the security posture management of the service itself, all the vulnerability management services, all of the compliance requirements, all of the updates, the support, availability of the data, all of the stuff that traditional on-prem environments require you to invest time on, Metallic will take care of as a SaaS service, right? So backup administrators, data protection administrators, and other people, for example, CISO for a company is now required to make these assessments. Many companies, I speak to many of those CISOs, they can sleep well knowing that their data is in a rock solid environment, protected and hardened. So those are all the services you provide. So customers do what? They consume the service by backing up their critical data and recovering their critical data based on their SLA requirements. That's all they have to worry about. Okay. And integrate, I want to stress this, and integrating the backup tool, which is what it is, the backup tool, into their overall security and data protection and business continuity strategy. Okay. A backup tool is not your data protection strategy. A backup tool is an enabler of your data protection, DR, and business continuity strategy. That is the key point.
Kind of like a cybersecurity policy isn't the answer to a ransomware event.
Exactly. So it's self-managed SaaS. So you go and create your plans and do backups. We offer managed service. Of course, with Veristor and partnership with Veristor, they offer the ability for customers to consume Metallic and assist the customers with all of their planning and strategy overall, right? And so the processes that are critical are: what is your migration strategy? What's your restore timelines, SLAs, things that we offer to customers that they can look at. Their backup health. Are my backups functioning properly? Am I using all the right appropriate, ability to, in terms of compliance? Hey, I am a global customer, but my US data needs to stay in US. My UK data has to stay in UK because of Brexit. And my EU data needs to be in EU and be GDPR compliant, right? Metallic has the ability to offer all that to you because you select where your data resides, right? So here are all of the compliance. Yes, go ahead.
If you can go back one, I'm moderating the questions. We're going to save until the end, but I think the one question's come in here that I think is really good to address, especially for larger enterprises. It says, one of the major concerns that we have using a SaaS DR solution is that typically the SaaS is using one cloud provider and assumes that provider is redundant and will be able to restore data when we need it. However, there have been some cases when these cloud providers have larger outages, whether due to DNS misconfigurations or network outages. In a more global market, does Metallic have an option to use two cloud providers for extra assurance and redundancy? So I'll let you address that. But I also want to say, again, because we have a lot of very large customers that are using this and we do the managed services, you still have, because a lot of your data may be on-prem with some of your applications. Obviously, cloud apps are being backed up there, but on-prem applications, you still, the management, Metallic is all SaaS-based, but you have media agents and data on-prem. So if you have a large database, for instance, that you need to recover, or you're not pulling that all down from a cloud provider. You could do the first restore can be on-prem, and the longer term be in the cloud, for an example. So how you want to address the redundancy and how that works with Metallic?
Absolutely. So very good question. And to Ferrol's point, Metallic, I'll go back to Metallic, is a hybrid cloud data management service, right? Which means that we are protecting customers' data on-prem. We are protecting customers' data in Azure. We are protecting customers' data in AWS, OCI, right? Wherever your data is, we have the ability to protect the data, right? Comprehensively. And that's why data classification becomes that much more important. We have the ability, we give you the ability to protect your data in different cloud environments. If you have an S3 bucket you want protected in AWS, absolutely, we have the ability to do that. If you have data in Azure VMs and a SQL database or whatever, we have the ability to protect the data there on-prem. So a lot of customers, a lot of large enterprise customers, like to Ferrol's point, they protect their on-prem data. They have their first copy of their data on-prem, for example, and they use Metallic Recovery Reserve as their secondary data that's completely virtually air-gapped in case of a massive outage on the customer side due to ransomware attacks, some other security incidents, right? They can pull that data back. Now, in terms of backend architecture, Metallic, I'll actually address that later, but I'll spend 30 seconds on it now. Metallic is a fully redundant, highly available, very high RAS, what we call it. It's a very high reliability, availability, serviceability, and security metric, and we track that. We replicate data in multiple regions, multiple secure availability zones, depending on where you want your data to be stored, right? So customers get to choose. If they're Azure, customer gets to choose which Azure region they want their data stored in. If it's AWS, customer choose which AWS region they want their data stored in. If it's OCI, same like that. So we give a lot of that power to the customer, but we have architected a backend to be fully redundant, highly available from a reliability, availability, serviceability, and security perspective.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yep. And then, I was talking about, when you're talking about your overall processes, and if you're a global company, or even if you're a US-based company or a local company, right? You may be in financial, you may be in federal business, you may be a state and local company, you may be, like a Target, right? Where you have to take credit cards. So you have to align to some of these regulatory requirements. And with Metallic, as you can see, we have some of the highest levels of security certifications and regulatory compliance. In fact, we are the only provider in this space that has FedRAMP High status. Nobody in this space has FedRAMP High. For those who don't know, it's based on NIST 800-53 security guidelines, and the high is the highest level of data security, privacy, and sovereignty that a SaaS service or a cloud service can achieve. We went above and beyond that, and we actually have been assessed for a DoD IL5, which is even higher than FedRAMP High security guidelines. So like I said, as you can see, if there was a critical security requirement, we have met it with our baseline security certifications.
Well, again, I like to point out too that this isn't just a pull through from another provider. It pulls through with whatever that is, as well as your own coverage on these. And it's
That's
also
right.
taking that aspect of delivering a service that is security first in its mindset, being able to be there for you.
That's right. That's right. I mean,
There's
go ahead, for it.
Go ahead. I was just going to say there's another question here. I mean, you have I obviously know a few of the slides that are coming up, but there's a question related, and then we're going to get to a couple of shared responsibilities here. But you're the CISO now, but you've also been involved on the technical side, and I don't know that everybody fully understands, if you're not in roles like yours, that providing a SaaS application like this is more than taking the software that you've been providing and then buying a bunch of resources and then implementing it there. So can you kind of share what are the differences between just running an app in the cloud and providing a SaaS solution like this? And then a couple of things over in that too is there's a question about deduplication technology, and of course we're still using that and doing things to bandwidth and that kind of thing. So go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So when I joined Metallic, that was 2.5 years ago. Running a SaaS service requires a completely different mindset of running, of managing the service. So it's not just creating an application, buying a bunch of VMs in the cloud, or deploying a bunch of VMs here, and someone else is actually doing the work for you, right? So there's a whole discipline called site reliability engineering, right? So we build Metallic site reliability engineering from scratch up. What does that include? That includes, of course, DevOps, DevSecOps processes, like literally had to document all those processes from scratch. Automation, end-to-end service automation. Our time to market of a region, meaning lighting up a region, was 6 weeks when we joined, and now it's less than a day. What does that mean? That means critical business to our customers. So it requires significant investment in automation of all of our services, from network infrastructure in the cloud to security services to monitoring to deploying the VMs and other databases and whatnot that support the services, other critical path services such as functions and those kinds of things, right? So it takes a whole host of services in the back end, observability, right? End-to-end. The only way we can manage a high reliability, availability, serviceability, and security is by ensuring we understand what's going on in this global service. Managing 100 petabyte plus of data across 32 different regions, monitoring and securing it is a really, it's a very big deal. Just to give you the scope, we were investing, I think, $120,000 annually in the cloud service 2.5 years ago. Right now, monthly, 100,000 monthly. Now, our monthly spend in the cloud is close to $2 million. And that goes into managing the service, all of the security services, all of the automation services, and all of the resources that come behind it. So it takes a lot of effort and energy into managing a SaaS platform. Now, in terms of deduplication and compression, so all of those efficiencies, Metallic is built on CommVault, right? So we have created the SaaS platform built on the rock solid foundation of CommVault, with CommVault's proprietary deduplication technology and compression technology. So you will still get all of the same data efficiency capabilities that you would with CommVault.
Yeah. So this is some of the layered approach that you talked about. The security, detection and response, all of the things. So you're going to have a world-class, security environment across on top of that application, right? So, and to some of the concepts and oft forgotten in enterprises about, the virtual air gap, immutability. There's another question in here. Does Metallic utilize a 3-2-1-1 backup strategy as part of this platform? So all of that's related. So,
yeah, that's right. And this is true for any good SaaS service model from a security perspective, right? The way we were able to achieve FedRAMP high security compliance is by implementing this multi-layer security model, right? From our perimeter threat with security detection, protection, and response services, all of the tools and services we've applied with our multi-layered zero trust model. It's a buzzword, but it starts with authentication. Now, MFA again is a buzzword. It really depends on the implementation. So SMS MFA, right? It's not secure anymore. Microsoft says so, right? And so we don't use MFA for our administrative users, right? We don't use SMS. We use hardware-based tokens, which are really, really, secure. We physically have to have it. We physically have to touch it. Those kinds of things. So virtual air gap, another buzzword. Immutability, another buzzword. So it really depends on the actual implementation of all of the services that we have deployed. Things like if you as a customer have your own KMS, and this is very important, right? And you're storing your data elsewhere, you are not air gap because a threat actor can come in and destroy your KMS, and now your data that is stored in some other location is useless to you. You cannot read it, right? So those are the kind of strategies you have to think about, right? And then finally, in terms of things that you need to be concerned with, Metallic gives you the ability to look at your security posture within Metallic dashboard, right? So there's anomaly detection. Is there any weird things going on in my data? We use cloud native tools and services to actually go above and beyond CommVault anomaly detection. So that's the added bonus. We are able to see, for example, in Node65, if there's malware in there, right? Significant amount of user audit trails, anything that's going on in your specific tenant, you will be able to see. And then you'll be able to send that to your security response team and take action.
And
so,
these are also things that are great when it looks at some of the new guidelines for critical infrastructure for a 24-hour reporting when you have an infection, you have malware on your ransomware, you pay it, 24-hour notification, 72-hour notification, right, in the event that there is an incident there. These things are hard to actually, be able to click a start watch, but these are the tools that also help support that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so this is the 50-50 thing that you talked about, Daniel, right? 50% investment in prevention, 50% investment in response and recovery. They go both hand in hand. And you have to have the right processes, tools, and services to support that.
So we have 7 minutes left here. One thing, a couple of other questions related to the technical, and I do want to close with the shared responsibility models too, security and operations. Does Metallic offer provisional segmented private tunneling for traffic to and from the platform?
Yes.
And then another, how do various products work together? For example, virtual machines and endpoint backup, can they be managed in the same pane of glass?
That's right. So answer to the first question is yes, it depends on the need. So we have to understand what the need and requirement is, but the answer is yes. The second one, absolutely. All of the things that I've been talking about, that Daniel has been talking about from a Metallic perspective, it's all single pane of glass.
Absolutely. So, and obviously those things outside of the platform, that's why you have partners like us, is to help build that, do those things. So, there's a shared responsibility security model that we want to talk about there, right? I mean, you're securing the platform, but there's still some things customers need to do. And then on the operating side of it, I mean, there's certain things you're not going to recover somebody's environment, right? I mean, you're providing the data protection and how that is. So kind of share those models there.
Yeah. So the customer is responsible for ensuring that their site is secure. Now we with Veristor and Metallic, we offer them the ability to do that, right? With tools and services, right? We're not going to know who is logging into Metallic. That's the customer's responsibility. So securing your AD environment, right? Those kinds of things. We do offer the ability to integrate your SAML provider, for example, and integrate your SSO and MFA, but it is still the customer's responsibility to use a secure provider to access the environment. That's on them, not on us, right? On us, we have completely created this access model where no one at Metallic has any ability to not only restore, but to read a customer's data in a readable format. We don't have that kind of access at all. It's completely secure, completely prevented. Now, there are workflows available with customers' approval that give us that elevated access, but it is only with customers' explicit programmatic approval, right? So those are the kind of things that we look at and say we need to ensure that the customer's environment is completely air-gapped on our side, meaning CommVault side. If CommVault got ransomware, Metallic data will still be secure. And then on the customer side, customers are responsible for securing their data. Customers are responsible for classifying their data appropriately in terms of this is critical data, so I need to have SLA as such and such and such, right? Application controls, we give the customers that ability. All of the network controls, host infrastructure, all of that stuff is our responsibility.
Okay. I want to close with one question here. It says, and it's going to be an absolutely shameless plug from me because I'm very proud of our capabilities here. It says, can the presenters provide some anecdote stories on how cyber threats were mitigated? First of all, I want to say, just as a policy, and I'm sure Metallic has the same policy, we do not mention customer names when it comes to anything around a security posture or incident. We have a major global manufacturer that had over 150 sites worldwide that had a very public attack. And the only sites that were producing product the next business day were the ones where we were providing their, using CommVault and providing our managed backup as a service. Because one of the things when you have a team like ours that is doing this, you have more than just the people there. When the incident happens, you're instantly able to expand the people that are coming and helping you to resolve that. And so that shared responsibility model, that team at the site becomes data managers, and then we become an extension. The other one that was very interesting I wanted to mention was a company in the food business. And it wasn't necessarily the biggest of our customers, but an interesting thing happened. They got hit, but not only did they get hit, all of their competitors got hit. It was clearly a targeted attack towards a industry. And there was certainly dwell time. There's certainly things like that because all of these attacks happened at the same time. That wasn't as large an enterprise, so there was some helping them rebuild their environment, but the data was there and we got it up. But we knew after the fact that, in that industry, different people were calling and did we get back up? And, we had a lot of interest in what we did. And so we're very, very much love the platform. CommVault is much more than a backup solution. It's an absolute data management platform. There's so many things we could talk about, from data classification and things that are helpful, in incident response or compliance. But we definitely have some great stories there. So with that, we're at the end of our time. And David, are you out there? I know we had some gift cards or something.
I'm here. Yeah. Excellent discussion. I learned a lot. I think this could help so many companies out there to be more secure and better protect their data and better recover. So thank you so much for all your wisdom and excellent advice. I appreciate it. Ferrol, Daniel, and Syed. And of course, thank you to Veristor and Metallic for joining the conversation today, supporting us on the event. I will go ahead now and announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card door prize. This is going to Paul Willett from Colorado. Congratulations. And also, I encourage everyone to check out the handouts tab. It's there that you'll find links to get started with Metallic and get started with Veristor as well. Well, thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us. And of course, thank you to our excellent presenters. Really appreciate it. See you next time. Have a great day.